One, two, three. Welcome to a very special episode of Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. As many of you know, Kenneth "Shark" Kinney has been the host of this show for almost the past 2 years, and he was going to continue hosting Speakernomics for next year. And sadly, he passed away unexpectedly last week. And the NSA staff and NSA members and those of us who've been involved with Speakernomics believed that we should have a special tribute episode to him because of who he was as a person and the amount of time and love he gave to the National Speakers Association and the speaking industry. So I was the original host of Speakernomics, and I am sitting back in the host chair temporarily. And we have 11 other people here with us today, and we are going to all share little short stories. So please join us as we share this love for our friend, Shark. So I remember back during the pandemic, there was that voice app that was really popular called Clubhouse. And I would go on every week to different speaker rooms. I helped Maureen Mahoney from the National Speakers Association. I helped her with the Clubhouse room that NSA did every week. And along the way, this person Shark appeared, and we would chat, and then we'd privately chat kind of snarky stuff to each other. And we became friends. Then we started talking on the phone, doing Zoom calls. And in 2021, when NSA returned to a live influence conference in person in Las Vegas, I was encouraging Shark to attend. And he told me, I'm not really a joiner. I don't know that the National Speakers Association is my thing. And I can be a little persistent. I kept saying, come on, how do you know? You've never been. And he goes, oh, I've heard this or I've heard that. And I said, oh, do we make our decisions based on how we hear things? And that was sort of the friendship he and I had, is we just gave each other a hard time over stuff. So he came, and at the end of Influence in Las Vegas, he came up to me and said, dang it, I'm going to join. And he didn't just join. He showed up fully. He showed up personally to the Thrive Conference and the Influence Conference every single year. And he also showed up with his heart to so many people, and he showed up and volunteered. And when the chair for Speakernomics was open 2 years ago, he wanted to be the host of Speakernomics. And when the team at NSA selected him, he was so happy. We talked about this show a lot, and he was always so happy. I want to share one personal thing, though, and that is 3 years ago, I went through a real rough time. I'm not real quiet about it. I let people know, but I went through a really bad mental health crisis. And it came on very quickly, and I knew something was wrong, and I reached out to 3 or 4 friends, Shark being one of them. And I vividly remember him calling me back after I left him a message, and he must have heard in my voice that I was struggling. And usually when he'd call, he'd give me a hard time, he'd cut up, he'd have a joke, he'd have something snarky to say. Not that day. I remember he identified it was him, and he said, I want you to answer this question right now. And he goes, and I don't want you to overthink it, and I want you to be deathly honest with me. And I'm like, all right. And he goes, on a scale of 1 to 10, 9 and 10 being suicidal thoughts and suicidal, where are you right now? And I told him I wasn't a 9 or a 10, but I was a 7 or an 8. And he said to me, all right, if you were a 3 or a 4, I'd help you right now. If you were a 9 or a 10, I would call an 800 number immediately, and I don't care if you ever speak to me again. But if you're a 7 or an 8, here's my advice. You're going to have to face that you're in this situation. You're going to have to get some help. You're going to have to go to a therapist, go in person. And he warned me that most people have to go through 3 or 4 therapists before they find the right one. And he told me how to select the right one. And then when I found some help and I started doing the work, I always would share with him what was being told to me, and he would give me his thoughts. But he also checked in on me every single week for a year. And I share that because that's the type of person he was. And I share that because I will never forget him for that. I'm doing a lot better now, but I'm going to miss my friend who's always been a big supporter of me the last 3 years as I went through that. And I just wanted to share that because that's my story about Kenneth "Shark" Kinney. So next, let's call on Maureen Mahoney, who worked at the National Speakers Association for several years and worked with him when he started being the host of Speakernomics. Maureen?
Thanks, Tom. And I think Shark would totally give you crap for calling me Maureen McCormick earlier. So
I heard that. I heard that as well when it came out of my mouth.
So I have to call you out on that because I know he would totally jazz you for that. Man, thanks. Oh, so I joined NSA, and Gosh, Tom, this is just the theme of this show, I think. I joined NSA in actually December of 2020, and you know, in the spring of 2021 was quite a crazy time at NSA from a staff perspective. We had half of the staff, left NSA. We lost a lot of historical stuff, and Jamie Nolan came in, and we brought in a new team, and Clubhouse was something that really saved me from the unknown, because I didn't know what to do at that time other than get on Clubhouse every week, build a better business, be a better speaker. And Mark just decided he was a part of this team, and he decided he was going to be my friend, whether I liked it or not. And sometimes I was even like, I don't know, like Shark and I had we had a lot of differences, and we had a lot of debates, and he taught me so much about just respect and just listening to other people's perspectives. And even if he, like, we had a lot of like really thoughtful conversations, and he would call me just to ask me my opinion on things, whether he agreed with me or not. But my opinion was valuable to him, and likewise, in those early days at Clubhouse, I I think I'm probably a much better speaker now because of the NSA. But if there's those recordings from the early Clubhouse days where I would just freeze in the middle of a Clubhouse room, I would stumble my words. It was so embarrassing. And Shark, like, I will never forget, Shark just sent me a note and said, "Are you having a stroke right now?" And I was like, I was so happy that he wrote that, because I needed that like laugh. I needed somebody to call me out on that, because I felt so embarrassed. It was so ridiculous. But but just since then, we became, we became really good friends. And even when I left NSA in December, which honestly it was actually a painful thing for me. Even, and Jamie knows it. Or the last time I was like, I don't want to go. But you get to a point in your career where you're offered an opportunity, and you just have to, you have to kind of take it. And when I told Shark that I was moving on, it was almost like, I mean, it was just like silence on his end. And, I hated like, he was like probably one of the first people other than NSA staff that I called, because we worked so closely together on Speakernomics. And I have to say, I was the one that called him to tell him he was the next host. And I mean, I will never forget it. And he was just like, stop, are you kidding? I was like, I thought you knew, because I thought you were kind of asking me questions. And he was kind of like doing a little digging. He was really good at like trying to get, just us girls talking, what do you think about, he'll say that. And I always admired that. And I know that it was quite an honor for him. And he texted me after to say that I changed his life in that sense. And he's just such a great friend. And he checked in on me even after I left NSA, and we just caught up a couple weeks ago. And he just was gushing about his time at Influence that I'm just kicking myself for missing. But I just have to share this one quick story, and then I'll be done really quick. So right now I'm on a vacation with my girlfriends, and two of my best friends. And I flew out on Friday night, and a gentleman came and sat next to me. And, we made small talk at the beginning. Entire flight, as we're landing, this gentleman pokes me. And even before I got on the plane, I was kind of going through texts with Shark, and I was like, this is a dangerous game you're playing, Maureen. Right before a flight, you're going to go through this whole journey. And I was laughing and crying and all kinds of things. So I'm on the plane, I'm just trying to just make it to the end of the flight. And the gentleman next to me, he pokes me, and so I have my headphones in. I take them out. I said, "Yeah, what can I do for you?" He said, "I'm really sorry. This is going to sound so creepy, and I really don't mean to be creepy, but my wife and I are pastors, and this entire flight, I just want you to know I'm praying for you, and I don't want to sound weird, but just something's telling me that I need to pray for you." And I just broke down and I was ugly, ugly crying. And I looked at him, I said, "My friend died this week. And I'm going on vacation with two of my best friends. And this has just been a really hard week." And his face turned white, and he was just like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Like, I said, "How would you even know that?" He said, "Just something told me. And I'm not very religious, but at the same time, it was like very comforting. And I just needed to hear that at the time. And, the universe does weird things. And I truly believe that, like, Shark probably had something to do with that. I don't know, but it's just remembering the good times, and just having everyone's back like he had yours. If he decided you were his friend, you were his friend, and he was going to take care of you. So, thanks.
Maureen, thank you so much for sharing that with everybody. Next, I'd like to invite to Speakernomics, Lois Kramer. Lois?
Thank you, Tom, and thanks for doing this. And boy, this is a Speakernomics I wish we weren't all on, quite frankly. But I remember when COVID shut down everything. And I'm going to talk about Clubhouse. I have to. That's my connection with many of you on here today, but particularly with Shark. And I got a text from my friend Crystal Washington. And she said, "There's this new platform and you need to be on it." And at that time, remember, Crystal, you had to sponsor me you had to vouch for me. And so I remember going on. I just went on out of the blue. I listened for a while, then went on. And I think there were 17 people who joined me, and I was gobsmacked. And then I said, "I'll be on next Monday at 5. And then there were 100 people on there. I couldn't believe it. And then the next week, it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And so many of you good friends joined me on there. And one of my early adopters was our friend Shark, who always had something so interesting to say. He had a PR background. He had a sharp marketing eye. And so I always enjoyed his insight on these comments. And he became a fast friend and started calling. We would call each other. Not just about business, but personal too. I remember I had a granddaughter about 12 weeks ago, and the first call I got after I posted was from Shark, and I wasn't surprised at all. But I have to tell you that he would call me occasionally, and he would always say, "I need some advice. I'm asking for a friend." We all knew what that meant. And then if he would disagree with me, I would say every time, "Shark, I would hate for this to happen, but I may have to let you go. If you keep disagreeing with me, I just may have to let you go." And we would laugh. I had anticipated influence this year so much because I knew what Shark was working on. He had shared it with me. He had vowed me to secrecy. Believe me, I didn't tell a soul. And I was excited for him. I was excited for all of us because I knew it was going to be a hit. And so I was thrilled to be able to be there and clap and cheer for Shark at Influence. And I talked to him right after Influence. And I was just so proud of him and everything that he had done. And I just am grateful for his friendship. I cherish his advice that he gave me. He always had salient things to say about almost everything. I also cherish the connections with many of you who are here today through Shark, and appreciate you for that. And, you know, COVID brought about so much loss. I like to look back and think, what are the positives that come out of even the most difficult situations? And one of the great positives for me was Shark. And I think I'm going to end it right there, Tom. But so appreciated his friendship. You all appreciate your friendship. And Tom, thank you for doing this today so we can remember just one hell of a guy.
Thank you, Lois. And Shark adored you, and he told me that all the time. Next, I'd like to welcome to Speakernomics, Denise Hamilton. Denise?
This is so hard. Now that I'm sitting here, starting this conversation, I'm struck by how hard this is. I actually met Shark on Clubhouse. You know, that's been mentioned before, where we all kind of gathered and huddled together for warmth during the pandemic. And we just became fast friends because that is who he was, right? And we're an unlikely pairing. I posted on social media how struck I was, and I posted his picture, and several people said, "What did you have in common with that guy?" And I had to, um, I'd love to share what I had in common with that guy. He believed in me. There are people who just, you meet them and they just believe you can fly. We've all had teachers or a Girl Scout, a Boy Scout troop leader, or somebody that just thought that you could fly and made you think that you could do anything. That's who Shark was for me. He was my official like fan, like groupie, head of my fan club, knocked my mother out of the way, and would just cheer me on in every single thing that I did, almost to the point of being weird. He adored my daughter, Javen. He would spend hours on the phone with her, helping her set up the back of my business. You may not know, my daughter runs the back of my business, and he would just sit with her and talk with her about best practices. And you think, like, you know, the way she cried when she found out he had passed away just really struck me, because there are people who have the capacity to just go out in ripples. Like, they're not your friend, they're the friends of your friends, and the friends of the children of your friends. And that's kind of the energy that he had, and I would say still has, because we're all here together to talk about him. So it's been it's been hard and important. Um, there is there are a lot of people right now who are rage farming us and who want us to be at odds with each other and ripping each other apart and just in constant battle. And it's so wonderful to be able to celebrate a real, true, bona fide friend. And I will miss him so deeply for that.
Thank you so much, Denise. And you know what? He did believe in you. Every time you did something, he would send me the link to what you were doing, and he was your biggest cheerleader, always. And so thank you for sharing that. And I know that he loves the fact that you know that. Next, I would like to welcome to Speakernomics, Mark Levy. Mark?
Well, thank you. I wrote something, so I'm going to read it. I first met Shark 3.5 years ago, the way many of us meet in this business, while waiting in front of a hotel for an airport ride after a conference. And it happened to be the NSA conference. It was his first conference, he told me, for the NSA. And Shark invited me to share his Uber. And on that short trip to the airport, I learned that his nickname, Shark, was not just marketing flash. He actually loved sharks. He studied them. He swam with them in open waters. And while the championship golfer Greg Norman is known as the Shark because Norman is a killer, Kenneth was shark because he loved the creature itself. He loved sharks. When he was telling me about the habits of hammerheads and of great whites, it was like he was telling me about his best friends. A couple of years ago, Shark told me he was launching his own conference. It was for the home services industry. So I asked him, why would you do that? And he said he was tired of waiting to be picked to speak. And so he wanted to do the picking. So he created his own stage. And true to form, that first conference wasn't in some boring hotel ballroom. It was in a major aquarium with tanks surrounding the room. And there was even a gigantic 55-foot whale shark drifting past the speakers as they spoke. Enormous. And Shark was always about the other person. So even though this was his conference, he put all his sweat and money into it. He shined the spotlight on every other speaker there over him. He brought me in to speak. He brought in Mandy Harvey, Susan Frew, Frotini, Iconomopoulos. He always made us the stars, even though it was his gig. And the last time Shark and I spoke was about 3 weeks ago. And it was right about that time that Cracker Barrel had made that disastrous logo change. So you know exactly the moment in time. It was like the day after. And I told him that I hadn't been to a Cracker Barrel in over a decade. And he said he didn't often go to Cracker Barrel, but he happened to go to one a few weeks earlier, just coincidentally. And the shocking thing, he said, was that now Cracker Barrel served beer and wine. And I said, Cracker Barrel? They're like the family restaurant. There is no way they serve beer and wine. You got something wrong there. So while we were talking, he texted me this 24-second video he had taken of the drink menu while he was there. And he laughed, saying, I don't know why I made a video of this static menu. I guess I should have just taken a photograph. The things you remember, right? But that's what he said during it. We hung up the phone. And when we hung up, I watched this 24-second video of the Cracker Barrel menu. And I texted him back a funny comment about the restaurant. And the very last words he sent me were, haha. And somehow that feels right. Those are good last words. Shark was an excellent guy. I feel lucky to have known him. And I will always remember him as a shark in the best possible sense of the word.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I remember after his conference, he told me flat out how much he thought that you rocked that stage at that conference. Next, we'd like to welcome to Speakernomics, Hannah Pryor. Hannah?
Thank you. I love these stories about him. Kind of feels like he's sitting with us. There are many words for this man, but I'm going to try to sum them up through 3 sets of adjectives and 3 tiny stories that accompany each one. So number 1 is Shark was passionate and pushy. And I mean that in the best way. So this past influence, we all sang a musical number on stage and Shark says, Hannah, you're going to come up on stage and do this thing with me. And I said, Shark, I can't sing. And he goes, you can dance, right? I was like, sure. And he goes, well, you're doing it. It's going to be great. I'm like, only for you, Shark. So passionate, but very hard to say no to. His pushiness was always wrapped in love. Number 2 was, I remember we had breakfast together, and the adjectives I can think of here are somehow in tension, opinionated and open-minded. We were talking about our sons. So his son is 14 and mine is 13. So we're navigating similar things with them. And I shared how my son is very involved in musical theater. And he was very surprised by this because in Memphis, that is not something that a lot of boys his age do. And I think there would be, no judgment from him, but some ridicule in the area that he grew up in. It's just not common. And we ended up getting into a really rich conversation about the arts and music and assumptions. And, it's funny because his reactions are so strong, but I think Maureen mentioned earlier, I've never met someone more willing to be wrong or have their perspectives be changed. And so we just had a beautiful conversation about that. And the last one, and probably the thing I'll never forget the most, is I met Shark at my very first influence, which was in 2022. I walked into that Nashville Opryland not knowing anyone and was completely intimidated by all of you folks that I saw walking around. And that night, again, not knowing anyone, I didn't really have any plans. And he had sat down near me at one point, struck up a conversation, and invited me to dinner with a group at that Old Hickory Steakhouse at the Gaylord. And I just couldn't help but think, man, this is someone who is so warm and welcoming. And as we finished that dinner, I remember feeling very insecure around all these other speakers. He looked me in the eye and he said, Hannah, you don't need to worry about a thing. You've got that it factor. Somebody telling you that at your very first influence will do something to you. And so I don't know whether it was him or a variety of other factors, but I will never forget that. And I'm just grateful to have had a short time with him and everything that he did for every one of us. I know that we'll carry that with us.
And Hannah, from that time he met you at the Influence in 22, he always was telling me about you. You always talked. He was always telling me about you. And he would say things as if you and I were old friends. He would talk about you like I knew who you were. And I would constantly remind him, I don't know Hannah. And he goes, that can't be true. And it's because of him that we met, because I was standing on the street at South by Southwest in Austin just last March. And this person walks by and grabs my arm and goes, are you Tom? Are you Shark's friend?
I did.
And it was Hannah. So I know you because of Shark. So thank you for that. Next, Dr. Jeannie Schneider. Jeannie?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for doing this. And all the stories make us love everything we love about Shark. What's coming to mind for me, we could tell stories all night long, but I think the first thing when I saw the news was how generous he is with his words and how generous he is with his mic. The spotlight was never on him. I mean, even if you were just doing an audio Speakernomics, he still put the spotlight on you. But he was always so generous with the mic. And I love to ask questions. That is one of my superpowers. But I pale in comparison to how Shark can ask a question. He asks you something that, we're speakers, right? Surely we can handle a quick interview. But he asked a question that made you stop in your tracks, that made you stop and think, what did he just ask me? And catch you off guard in a funny way or a meaningful way. Or when he asked me the question, he said, I want to talk to you about your CSP. How's it feel to get your CSP? I'm going to talk to you later. And after the 45 times we tried to get together, to say, okay, I'm here, I'll be right back. When we finally got there and he asked me, it made me stop and think, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a part of NSA? What does it mean to have a CSP? What does it mean to be surrounded by these people? And he's entering me in the middle of, I felt like the aquarium, right? People are swimming around. You hear people's voices. And yet that's what Shark did. We were all swimming around in the aquarium, but he was always the shark. And even at that conference that Mark mentioned, we're all standing there. And anytime he wasn't actively talking to one of us or one of his amazing guests, he was staring at that aquarium. He would stand there for minutes or hours staring at that aquarium. And that's where I learned, like everybody, tell me about the shark thing. Like, why do you love them? And he started to tell me. But the most important thing that comes up for me right now is every time I was trying to connect with Shark, we always say, wait, I'll be right there. I'll be right there. I'll be right there. Oh, no, I'm by this table. No, I'm by that table. Half of our texts are, where are you? I mean, that's where they just were, where are you? I'm over here. I'm over here. And so when I looked back to figure out what I would say today, I thought it was fitting that my last text from Shark, like y'all said, is, where are you? And Shark, we know where you are, but we also know you are right here with us. And the reminders, I will always think of his questions, that whenever he said, may I have a 2-minute conversation, which we all know turned into 2 hours, but a 2-minute conversation could also stop us and we would just get a little bite of his brilliance. So Shark, we know where you are.
Jeannie, thank you so much. Next up is Jamie Nolan, the CEO and president of the National Speakers Association. Jamie, welcome to this episode of Speakernomics.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you so much for offering to put this together and hosting this. It's so moving and appropriate. I've just gotten to know Shark the last couple of years since he took over Speakernomics. And I just remember when Maureen told me how excited he was for this volunteer position that was going to require hours of his time every week for the next 52 weeks. And he was so excited. I actually thought there was maybe something wrong with him. I was like, who would get that excited about doing that much volunteer work? And not only did he continue to build upon the amazing work that Tom did and then RK3 did, but he then took it upon himself to build a website and add the video and continue to look at how we can market Speakernomics and elevate it. And he just continued to elevate the creativity of that podcast. And then he asked if we would consider him for another year. And I was like, okay, clearly there is something wrong with you, but yes, we will absolutely love to have you host it for another year. And he just had so much to give to this community. Shelby Stevie, who took over what Maureen was doing with Shark, really wanted to be here today. But she wanted to share that he had such big visions for Speakernomics, and we hope to continue that momentum. And I'm sure all of you experienced this, but he always asked the same two questions. How are you doing, both work and life? And how can I make things easier for you? And he said that to everybody all the time. And he always said he was here to serve. So we're going to miss him. He has had a profound impact on this community. We are so grateful for him, and he will never be forgotten.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And I know how much work it is to do Speakernomics, and he absolutely loved it. Next, I'd like to invite our friend Mike Mahoney to the show.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. It's just so wonderful to hear all these memories about Shark. I was fortunate to meet him in 2021 at Influence, and it was one of those things where we often do at Influence or Thrive, where you kind of bumpish into someone, you look at the name tag, and you're like, Shark? What? Okay, I got to know more about that. And then, by the way, I said, when I was a kid growing up on Long Island, I was actually bit by a shark. So we're kind of sort of bonding over all of this. Shark, his passion for it, my passion, not clearly to the depths that he had. And it was shortly after that, I have had the privilege, along with Tom and Trevor, and Shark, that we've been in the mastermind group for over 4 years. It's about every Friday, 9:30 Eastern, we'd be on. And rarely did we ever keep it to an hour. Someone would have to say, I got to go, because as Jeannie, you said, Shark there was never a 2-minute, and I recall saying several times to him, brother, land the plane, please. Where are we going? Because he'd be all over the different things. And I can just tell you that his heart for serving and helping all of us, I know in our small group, continuously was always there. In fact, my last text to him was the Saturday that he had passed. That morning, I texted him to check in and let him know that I was thinking about something he had suggested earlier in the week that at first I kind of passed off, and realized kind of the brilliance in the thought, and said, hey, I just want to let you know I followed through on this. Wanted to get your thoughts on it. And I didn't get a response, which is very unlike Shark. He's usually like right back on it. And I sent him a second text in the afternoon about something else, and didn't get a response, and it wasn't until Monday when we got that news from our small group. And I can tell you that there were some beautiful things said about Shark on here, without a doubt. All very true. The other thing that was immensely clear to all of us was not only his love for Michelle and Christian, and his life with them, but also what NSA did for him. As much as he's done for us, he'd share in our group and maybe with you all as well what this community did for him, and that can't be understated one bit. So brother, I'm glad we had a chance to fly the plane together and with our group and all that you've done to make NSA a better place and this world a little brighter.
Thanks, Mike. And he did. He gave, but he also loved this community. He loved NSA. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Next, I'd like to invite Jen Buck to speak.
Thank you so much, Tom, for including me on this. This has rocked my world more than I thought it could. Shark and I, like a lot of you, met on Clubhouse. And I remember when it started going from just a guy every Saturday morning in this speaker group to this friendship, because I started getting these messages on Instagram that were sarcastic and they were witty and they were unexpected and they were totally unprompted. He and I had never talked. And that just started this great friendship. And so from 2020 till about 2022, we were just pals, constantly texting funny things back and forth. But somewhere in 2022, we decided that we needed to have our own little small mastermind. So every morning, on Monday mornings at 11 a.m. my time, we would get together on Zoom and talk about our business. At least that's what we said we were doing. We were really just, between us girls, chit-chatting and catching up on the family. And I was hearing about the latest cool thing that Michelle had gotten him that had a shark on it. Or I was hearing about Christian starting school or going away to camp. And at some point he wanted to meet my husband. And so he said, where is your husband? And so every Monday my husband would poke his head in and make sure he said good morning to Shark. And this friendship was great. But here's the thing I noticed fast. I thought I was Shark's best friend, but I realized all of you were also his best friend. And that's the thing that is really clear to me, that we've lost someone so special. Seeing your faces and putting together the stories that I've heard for 3 years now has been such a gift for me, because I knew about different things that were happening. I knew about different people. I knew about the best smile in the world that he would always talk about. I knew about little things about each and every one of you. So even though I thought of him as one of my best friends, I realized that was the gift. That was the magic of Shark, is that I was right, but he was all of your best friend too, right? It was this guy that had magic and everybody loved him. And those conversations will never be forgotten. And to land this plane, I will say this. On my calendar, for as far, I went forward 2 years to see how far my little flag on my calendar for Monday mornings at 11 a.m. went. And every Monday they said, Shark and Jen conquer the world. And that is something I'm going to leave, and I can't take it off, because every day I want to be able to know when I glance at my calendar that somewhere in my week, I've got a reminder of a guy who believed in me and a guy that I loved very much. So I can't thank you enough for letting me be a part of this. I loved him a lot.
And Jen, he loved you a lot. And much like his relationship with Hannah, he would talk to me about you as if you and I were the best of friends. I think he didn't realize that all of his friends didn't always know each other, because I think he lived in a world where he loved us, we loved him, and therefore we must love each other. So
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks.
Next, I want to ask Trevor Blundell to share his thoughts. Trevor?
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, my first years ago NSA national event, go to one of those early breakfasts. I know a handful of people at the whole place, and there's a guy sitting by himself. So I take that opportunity and get to know this man nicknamed Shark. And, just kind of dove right into it, right? Just a great conversation. And not an hour later, I see him in the hallway and he calls me over and he's like, hey, my friend Tom and I here host this first timers dinner and we'd like you to come to dinner. And, it's those small moments, right? And I don't know anybody and he invites me. And then fast forward 6 weeks later, we become friends and he calls me and says, hey, we're starting this mastermind group. We want to talk and want to know if you want to be a part of that. I'm like, you got the right number here. Like, like I'm just kind of newer into this and I'm just concerned about adding enough value to the rest of the group. And he's like, oh, don't worry. I see that already. So you just come. And it's like, dude, that's just people you want to surround yourself with. And we hear that tonight in that resonate. He could see things in other people. He asked the questions, like those deep questions he'd go right in that we've heard about tonight. And he just makes a better version of other people. And isn't that who you want to be around? And every conversation was just an interesting, good conversation. And to tighten it up was difficult, as we said. But he knew more about everything that I'll ever know, right? He was like my chat GPT Shark, like I just ask him and he's got all this information. He's like, you don't know that? I'm like, no. And just that pleasure to be around. And then he just joked around and even found that he knew so much about everybody, like what Jen was just saying. And he's just like, hey, I found this domain, manufacturing greatness. Like that should be your name. And then I didn't, I kind of thought about, kind of like Mike said, right? Kind of sits with you for a minute. And he's like, yeah, if you don't pick it up, I'm going to. So I did right away. And here we are, there's a legacy and my name was Shark forever. So I think, if we all can just kind of do what Shark did, he just saw the greatness in other people. It didn't matter. He just picked it up. And that's just what I'm going to miss about him. And I look for all of you to keep that spirit. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Trevor. And I will never forget when he came up with the idea of the name for your company is Manufacturing Greatness, because I remember going like, this guy is a marketing genius. It just came out. He said it. He searched the URL. It was available. And it took you a couple of weeks to pick up the URL and start thinking about changing the name of your company. And every time I see your stuff around manufacturing greatness, I will always think of Shark. Our last guest joining us today is Crystal Washington. And Crystal was the last host of Voices of Experience, which was the long-going CDs and then eventually turned into a podcast. And she modernized it into what became Speakernomics. And anytime I would say that I'm the first host of Speakernomics, Shark would remind me that really Crystal was, because she was the first one to change the format that I just changed the name. And so every time I try to take that credit, he would remind me the credit really goes to Crystal. Crystal, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Like many of us, I met Shark originally on Clubhouse during COVID when we were all trying to, figure it out and find our people. And he came off as a very nice man on an online network, right? And then I met him at Influence in Vegas. And I remember when I first met him, he came up to me and he's like, it's me, Crystal, it's Shark. And it was so fascinating because I looked at him and I realized he didn't have on armor. Most people, especially in the speaking business, when you meet them, there is an armor, there is a facade, but I could immediately see him. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we just got to talking a little bit. He ended up inviting me to come onto his podcast. And one of the things that surprised me about him, because again, I interact with so many of our peers that I totally love, is that he talked about sharks and his love of sharks, but his love of his wife and his son. And it was just so, we spent way more time talking about that than anything else. Once we finally got over that, I was like, oh, we should probably record the podcast. But just seeing his anchoredness in his family and understanding his purpose on so many levels. And so when he took over Speakernomics, I was so tickled because he has this wonderful ability. Not only could I could see him because he could see other people. if that makes any sense. And that came across in how he interviewed people. And I know the last time that I saw him and spoke to him was at this last influence. And I caught him a little bit after he did his performance. And I just told him that was incredible. And he was like, oh, that means a lot coming from somebody like you. I could see he wasn't anchored in it. And I grabbed his arm and I spoke slowly. I said, and I need you to hear me. That was incredible. Thank you for doing that. And I could see him settle for a minute. And then we got to talking about Christian. And I think Christian's birthday was on that day, or I believe it was. And he was just talking about how incredible he was. And right then, as we were talking about him, Christian called him and he put him on speakerphone. And I just thanked Christian. I said, thank you for sharing your dad with us. He made you completely proud. Because Shark said his son told him, no, you have to go. And so I said, you're sacrificing your dad's time for us. Just know that there's a lot of us that really appreciate you. And so I'm so tickled that my last words to and after that I said, Shark, I said, I'm gonna leave you so you can talk to your son. Y'all get to talking. So I'm so glad that our relationship opened around his love for his child and ended around that same love. As a futurist, I spend a lot of time thinking about purpose and legacy. In the midst of us people that do foresight doing all these second order maps and figuring out alternative futures, one of the things we talk about often is, are we being good ancestors? How can we be a good ancestor? You're looking 50 to 150 years down the line. And Shark is somebody that I can say has been a good ancestor. He's raised his child with love. We wish he had more time, but he's in a sense raised all of us too, right? Like he's been a great ancestor to us and leaving us with this beautiful legacy on how to encourage other people, how to love our families at the same time, and how to show up whole as who we are. So I'm honored to have known him, and I'm honored to have been impacted by him, and that he makes up a piece of my speaker lineage too.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And you couldn't have said it nicer or better, talking about the way he loved his wife, Michelle, and his son, Christian, because that was always at the heart of everything that he talked about. So there's been so much said over the last 45 minutes or so. And for those of you who are listening to this episode of Speakernomics, if you knew Shark, you know what we're talking about. If you didn't know Shark, I hope we've shared a little bit of his life with you and the influence he's had on so many of us. A couple of quick things I just want to recap is it's interesting to me how almost everyone on here either met him on Clubhouse, met him at Influence, met him at Thrive, or met him waiting for a cab somewhere. And that slight chance meeting, the friendship never died because of him. We all meet a lot of people in social media. We all meet a lot of people at conferences. We all have shared cabs with people on the way to the airport. But not everybody turns that into a lifelong friendship. And he didn't just do it with a few people. There were a dozen of us on this call, but there were 3 or 4 dozen more we should have invited to be on this call. We just couldn't have everybody in one podcast. And so I wanted to share that I think that it was so important. We also made reference, so many of us, to his performance at the last Influence. I remember the day he came up with the idea for God Bless the NSA. And he took Lee Greenwood's song and the lyrics to God Bless the USA, and he wrote them down. And I remember him calling me and he goes, I want full honesty. I don't want you to be nice because we're friends. I'm going to tell you this idea. I'm going to read you this song, and I want to pitch it to the NSA staff to see if we could perform it on stage and bring a whole bunch of speakers up. And he went through the whole thing, and it was so well written and it was so clever. And then standing there watching him perform it with so many of his friends around him. In the last week, I've watched that video 6 times because he loved that chance to do that. So as we wrap this up, if you're listening to this in the recent near time, so many of his friends, especially Jeannie Snyder, started a GoFundMe page. That information is available on the NSA Facebook page. And if you can't access that, you can reach out to any one of us and we can get you the link to that, because his family is going to have to go on without him. And we're trying to do whatever small thing we can do to help. But just in wrapping up, and I can't quote everybody, and I have a few tears in my eyes, so I can't read my own notes, but he believed in us. He asked us questions that made us think about who we were. He showed us what close friendship was about. He had a deep passion when he volunteered, and he did everything he could to be the best friend that he could. I can't even go through the rest of those notes, but everybody said such poignant things. I want to thank all of you who joined me on this episode of Speakernomics. I want to thank everybody who listened. Share Speakernomics, all of the last 2 years' episodes, with all of our friends in the speaking industry, because that is his legacy. We have nearly 100 episodes where Shark shared his thoughts and put the spotlight on so many other people. Thank you, Shark, for being our friend. And thank you all for listening to Speakernomics. Say it with me, everybody. We love you, Shark, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
We
We
love
you, Shark. Hang on, I gotta find the record button to stop the. Oof. For some reason, Zoom, it still says it's recording and I can't figure out how to stop it.
That's fine.
But we'll just let it roll. But we're done with the recording.
Thank
They'll
you,
cut.
Tom.
Thank you
so much, Tom.
Thank all of you.
This
Oh,
was
there's-
incredibly healing, honestly.